In what ways does your media product choose, develop, or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? In our horror opening scene, there were many things that needed to take into account. For example, the conventions that audiences are used to seeing when first introduced to a horror opening scene. For example, the idea of equilibrium right at the beginning, but then minor errors that may lead to something bigger. A film that is good at doing so is Paranormal Activity, where we first see everything is okay and fine, but then throughout the film things get wrong and scary. That is what we were going to do, and is the reason we have two different perspectives, the horror perspective and also the novel perspective. So in a way, the movie follows and challenges the usual horror conventions by having equilibrium and destruction at the same time. Our horror opening scene also develops certain horror conventions. For example, our little possessed girl follows the usual conventions by being young and blonde, portrayed as innocent, however soon to be very troublesome and scary. We developed this idea by making sure that the audience can see that there is no split personality, she is fully possessed. The other characters in our horror opening scene is what will be known as a bit bizarre, because the mother, father, sister, brother all have different ethnic backgrounds. However, we hope that this will make it clear that the children are adopted by the parents, and that is the reason why there is a special connection, which we hope the audience will be able to infer from just our opening scene, that the story will be about the struggle due to that supernatural connection. Our horror opening scene also fully revolves around the props used. This is because the props that were used is to portray the two different perspectives, the horror perspective and the equilibrium perspective. We do this by showing two different sides to the same props used. For example, the doll. We had two dolls in which one of them looked normal, but when the perspective switched, we used another doll that's been tampered with in order to make it look scary and appropriate for the scene with the horror perspective. We also used a range of weird scribbles and hanged them all over the room. This idea was originally inspired by The Ring. The scribbles were used to show the distress in the child's mind into solid matter. Since the child did not have any dialogue, it seemed appropriate to try to communicate to the audience through weird drawings in the horror perspective. The characters' costumes didn't really have any intentions to challenge, develop, or meet the conventions, since everyone is dressed as an average family, and the doctor in his formal uniform. However, the little girl is where we decided to meet the horror conventions by revealing her to be messy and scary and bloody in the horror perspective, and by doing so, meeting the conventions like seen in 30 Days of Night.
How does your media represent particular social groups? We challenged the stereotypes of a typical nuclear family. We did this by each person being from a different background and outcasting two nucleus members, Dennis and Elizabeth. However, we follow some stereotype visions, such as the doctor being Asian and the little blonde girl to be the possessed character. We did this because the media portrays little blonde kids to have an unusual twist to them. The movie that inspired us was Carrie, as their main character is a blonde girl who is isolated and possessed. Also, the fact that little girls are usually portrayed innocent and wholesome in our production. We reveal both sides, the innocent, wholesome, and the sinister side of the little girl. Our doctor being Asian was done on purpose, as it follows media conventions and would be something people would expect to see. As the family are not a typical family that you would expect, we've represented our family to be different because a Somalian mom and a Spanish dad cannot make two white children. This confuses the audience.
What kind of media institution might distribute your media product and why? We looked at Twisted Pictures for one of our production companies. This is because the Twisted Pictures icon has barbed wire over it. This represents the girl's state of mind. We also used Twisted Picture for one of our production companies because of the girl's scar. Twisted Pictures are known for blood and gore. Our second production company was Blumhouse. We decided to use Blumhouse as they produce psychological films. They produce films like Insidious, which we got some of our inspiration from. We got the idea of the girl being possessed from the film. Another film was Sinister. We got the idea of a demon possessing the girl from this film. We think that Blumhouse would want to distribute our film because it is unique and new. This is because it takes different inspirations from different films they produce and put it into one film. We also think that our film is the only one on the market and that the audience would like this, meaning more money will be made. We also think that Twisted would like to distribute our media product as we use conventional mise-en-scène from a supernatural horror film. For example, white pale skin, blood and ripped costume. We think our poster would look like Oculus. This is because it looks stylish and has layers of meaning. It also has lots of connotations of the woman being restricted and controlled. It also does not give lots of information away, which will make the audience impatient. This would give a great effect towards the audience, and we think that the production company would love this. We also think that the pictures would go with the stereotype of a possessed kind of film. We also think that the production companies would like that we did surveys before to find out what the audience actually like. This means that we have really thought about what we are going to do, and the production companies would love that we've got feedback from the audience.
What have you learnt about technologies from the process of constructing this product? From the process of making this film, I have learnt many different techniques to improve the film. For example, cutting the different scenes at the right moment and placing it on the timeline. Many tools were used to edit and create a seamless film. For example, razor tool, rolling edit tool, and hand tool, and zoom tool. During the process of the film, I encountered many problems with the video and audio. Example would be when the audio had a lot of crackling, and I used an audio effect called dehummer and denoiser. This reduced the crackling and made the audio sound better. Also, as we filmed two different scenes on two different days, the positioning of the camera caused some of the frames to be slightly out of place, and so I had to place different scenes in between the changes, which would distract the audience from the change and make the film seamless, making the viewing experience better. We had to film from different perspectives and different point of views, as we did a shot reverse shot to show the point of view of Elizabeth, and an over-the-shoulder shot of the family outside of the room. Another problem was the main title and character title, as the font that we wanted to use could not be accessed by Premiere, and I had to save and import them into Premiere. During the placing of all the components, we thought that a voiceover would make the film more interesting and make more sense to the audience, and so we recorded the voiceover in a soundproof room with the program Logic. At the end of the film, the camera was deliberately handheld, and at the point, I thought shaking the camera would give the scene a good effect.
Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learned in the progression from it to the full product? When we first started our preliminary, we had very little knowledge of what we had to be done and why. For example, continuity, and the 180-degree rule, amongst others. This is when we were determined to make sure that our preliminary should turn out as great as possible. However, we met a slight speed bump when editing, and it's because we didn't have much experience or knowledge about using Premiere to edit.
As we kept coming closer and closer to our finale product, we made sure that we have got over and learned about the things we struggled with in order to make our finale product effective and thorough. And that is what we did. Since we have already experienced all the downsides from our preliminary, we were able to move on and avoid the obstacles that we were faced with when dealing with our preliminary task. One of these obstacles was camera angles when filming our preliminary. We found difficulty getting the correct camera angles for editing, such as shot reverse shot or match on action, and so we had to refilm. In our finale product, we had similar inconvenience, but due to our experience from the preliminary, we were able to overcome this obstacle, but quickly and effectively, refilming in order for it to sync with the editing.
Who would be the audience for your media product? Our movie Externus is targeted at teenagers. This is because even though it is a horror film, we found that it wouldn't attract a more mature audience rather than young adults who are still beginning to mature and understand. So it should be ranged from the ages 16 to 21. The reason being is that the opening scene has gruesome scenes that cannot be seen by audiences under the age of 15. The type of language used within our horror opening scenes also reveals that it is the same sort of terminology that might be used by young adults ranged from the ages 16 to 21. The way we made it suitable for our target audience is by using a storyline that teenagers are into, such as possession, as it is unusual to see. Our movie will appeal to fans of psychological horror, which we established in our research through the survey we did in SurveyMonkey. Through the result of our survey, we found out that our target audience prefers psychological horror rather than supernatural or sci-fi. Our audience also wanted our movie to be set in a dark atmosphere. However, we set it in an atmosphere with bright lighting, as it is set in a mental institution.
How did you address your audience? In our media product, the 2-minute opening to our horror film, Externus, we tried to appeal to a particular target audience, which is really important because while we was planning the film, we could always go look back to our target audience. Our target audience was 16 plus, so we made the film suitable for that age. We think this is the best age rating, as we can start to do more complex topics like possession and demons. We could not do this if the age rating was below 16 because it would not be suitable for young children to watch our opening, as it is very dark and some children would not be able to take it. We wanted to have both genders watch our film, so we used boys and girls in our film. We had a possessed girl and Dennis, played by me. This would address to both genders and we would have a bigger target audience. We also used makeup on the girl. This would make the film more interesting and we'd have a bigger target audience as it attracts a large range of people who like blood and gore. When we looked at our track, Ring Around the Rosies, we looked at different horror films and reviews from them. People wanted something which was unique and new, so we got a young year 7 from our school to sing the track. We changed the tone so it sounded very dark. We looked at the reviews from other horror films. We found a soundtrack that the audience likes. This would attract the audience as it sounds creepy and bizarre. Another factor that we would attract the audience was our makeup and mise en scène. We used a disfigured doll in our opening. This would attract the audience as it looks creepy and bizarre. We also used children's drawings on the wall. This would attract the audience as it has lots of connotation and meaning behind it. We also used the conventions of possessed girl, like the deep cuts. We did this with latex. Things like this would appeal to the audience who like blood and cuts. Some key moments that would attract the audience were when I start to see the children's drawings on the wall. This would attract the audience as it's the first glimpse of the possession of the girl. Another key moment was when I touched the Kel's arm at the end, and it puts lots of thoughts of what's going to happen next and makes you think about it more. This would make the scene more interesting and would build suspense.